Amen. Amen.
L'chaim, l'chaim, everybody. L'chaim, to life. We are here for life. No doubt about it. So if you're in the airport and you see Jewish men forming together a minyan, pray together, put on talis, tefillin, the whole works. And they're being overtly Jewish, but not in an obnoxious way. But of course, they're not hiding it. How do you see that? How do you look at that? Do you look at it, feel a little awkward? Maybe even ashamed? Like, isn't prayer for the synagogue? Why are they making a spectacle of themselves? Even though they're not being obnoxious about it? You kind of applaud it silently, but, just move on. Or are you enthusiastic and you think, this is beautiful. Love to see this. So today we're going to make a Shavuos prep. Holiday Shavuos is coming. Time of giving the Torah is a critical time in Jewish life, because if not for this day, we would just be another Joe in the street. Because of this day, there's something unique about the Jewish people and unique about every individual Jew. So what is exactly unique about the Jew? So there, of course, the giving of the Torah, chosen people and all that. We're going to go into one quality today. One quality and see where that takes us. Are we ready for the ride? Fine. So in the prep for this holiday, which was on the 6th of Sivan, this Thursday night, Friday, the Jewish people came to the foot of Mount Sinai 3,335 years ago on Rosh Chodesh Sivan, a couple days ago. First day of the month, they all came there united, one people with one heart. The following day, God said something to the Jewish people. Let us share. Okay, see in front of you, Torah studies? Good. Let us share. The verse tells us in the book of Exodus, and you shall be to me a kingdom of princes and a holy nation. Right? We are a kingdom, mamleches kohanim, the goy kodesh. Goy means nation. Kodesh means a holy nation. And then when we call non-Jew a goy, it just means from the nations, because we're also called a goy. Goy kodesh, a holy nation. So some people might use it in a derogatory manner, but it's not at all a derogatory term, essentially. And we're called this mamleches kohanim. We're like kings. We're a nation of priests, a nation of kings, shall we say. So that's all in the prep, not leading up to Matan Torah. Now, not only did we observe, the holiday back then, we observed the holiday from back then, but there are other things that also occurred and have a connection to this day of Shavuos. And we're going to speak about 3 great leaders connected to this day. One, of course, is Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, right? His connection, well, pretty obvious. We got the Torah, Mount Sinai, from him. But King David is also connected to this day. And so is Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the leader of, and the founder of, rather, of the Hasidic movement. So what's their association to this particular day? So the Talmud tells us that King David, he passed away on Shavuos. That's what Yossi the son of Boon says. Baal Shem Tov, what's his connection to this day? So the previous Rebbe writes in Likkutei Diburim, there's a tradition among Hasidim in Volhynia, historic region in Central and Eastern Europe, that the Baal Shem Tov passed away on Wednesday. Accordingly, it is clear that our teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, passed away on the first day of Shavuos. Now, nothing is random, right? Everything has its purpose. And the fact that righteous people, they finish their life on the day they finish their life, everything about their life is revealed. In spiritual terms, it's revealed. So the fact that they passed away on Shavuos, King David and the Baal Shem Tov, means that their entire life reflects something about Shavuos. Okay. So what's their connection to Shavuos exactly? And more importantly, how does it implicate us? What does that mean? Okay. It's very nice that they maybe have a connection to the holiday, but Torah is a guide for us in our lives, so it has to impact us in some manner. How so? So what's unique about all 3 of these individuals that are connected to the holiday of Shavuos, as we said, Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, he gave us the Torah on this holiday, and King David and the Baal Shem Tov passed away on Shavuos, and therefore there has to be some kind of personal connection because the culmination of all their life works is revealed then. So again, what does this mean? How does it apply to us? So there's a common denominator between these 3 people. One is that they're all kings, right? As we mentioned, on Shavuos, God proclaimed us a kingly people. These 3 people demonstrate royalty. Now, on the surface, we can understand King David, of course, because he was King David, right? But we're saying all 3 do. How so? So Moshe Rabbeinu, he was called a Nasi. A Nasi is, as the Mishnah says, or the Midrash says rather, in text number 5, Yocheved, Moshe and Aaron's mother received priesthood and the kingdom. Aaron was appointed high priest, Moshe was appointed king. As the passage states, he was the king of Yeshua in Israel. So we see in source material that he's called a king. In what way does he reflect kingship? We'll see. What does that mean to us? We'll also see. Now, obviously, King David is king because he was David Melech, Israel, right? But not only is he king, but he's the quintessential king. Not only is he the quintessential king, but he is assigned, or rather, God assigns to him the kingship of the Jewish people in perpetuity. As the text tells us from the Rambam Maimonides, once David was appointed king, he acquired the crown of kingship. Afterward, the kingship belonged to him and to his male descendants forever. As the Torah states, your throne will be established in perpetuity. God assured David that the monarchy would never be taken from his descendants. Okay? Again, not only is he King David, but he is the king forever because it will be never taken away from his descendants. Fine. Baal Shem Tov. What does that mean that he's a king? Right. Well, he comes from the Ukraine. He was not the king of Ukraine. However, he definitely was royal. He had a nobility to him, a sense of transcendence, that standing before the Baal Shem Tov, one felt like they were standing before true royalty. He is the first Hasidic leader. He is the first to have followers who were not coerced, compelled, but freely chose him to be their leader, to be their Nasi, to be their Melech, to be their king. And that's something unique. Chosen by the people, and has this sense of transcendence as royalty. As the previous Rebbe writes, Sefer HaSichos, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi once said, when my master, Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezrich, wanted to describe the transcendence of my spiritual grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, he would say that the exaltedness of a powerful king is nothing compared to the transcendence of the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov. Just like a king is above and beyond, the Baal Shem Tov is above and beyond, even greater than that of a king. Right, and for those who had ever been by the Rebbe, that's myself, and I think I'm probably the only one here in today, was by the Rebbe. We know what it means to stand truly before a king, in a sense of awe and trepidation, in the sense of the greatness of an individual. That was the Rebbe, and this stems, of course, and began in the Hasidic movement with the Baal Shem Tov. Okay. So the fact that these three kings were all born on, are connected to Shavuos, right? As we stated earlier, which is the day that we became a nation of kings. So that strengthens and helps us develop our individual quality and capacity for kingship. As the Rebbe says in this week's Sicha, Moshe, David, and the Baal Shem Tov were leaders and kings. With this, they endowed and revealed the capacity for kingship in every Jew. Okay, we get the connection. Shavuos to these three, and those three to us. Because this is a quality of the holiday of Shavuos, is kingship. And then they're endowed with it, and hence they give that to us being faithful shepherds, feeding the flock. They feed us this quality. But what does this mean exactly? Does it mean that we're kings in our personal lives? We understand it when we speak about the nation of Israel, the Jewish people, what it means that we're kingly. But what does it mean on an individual level? How do we understand that? And furthermore, in what way do they help us develop it? What does that mean? How do we understand that? That will be our discussion. So what does this mean? That we should develop a mindset of a king. That we should be like Moshe, David, Baal Shem Tov, who were kingly. So we're going to learn from all three of them, but in particular, we're going to learn from the Baal Shem Tov. And of course, we're going to learn from what they are all about, and understanding who they are and what they are, and therefore what they, as faithful shepherds, taking care of their flock, what they give to us. Okay? So let's get some essential, basic ideas of kingship, as the Rabbi explains in the Sikha. Text number 9. Primary facet of kingship is transcendence. Right? We mentioned that earlier. The monarch is exalted and above the nation to the point that he may not lower himself to perform menial tasks. His personal needs must be provided by the nation without limitation. No one in the country can prevent the king from doing what he wants to do. Jewish people are endowed with a similar capacity. Mount Sinai, the Torah raised us up high above the world, meaning the human condition. This means that with respect to Torah and mitzvahs, we must behave like kings. We must devote ourselves to mitzvahs as if we have no other tasks or concerns in our minds. No worldly consideration should ever keep us from fulfilling a mitzvah. Let's understand this. Does a king have to worry about what others think? Absolutely not. Does a king have to worry about what's in his way? Absolutely not. What's in his way is just removed. If he needs something, he gets it, irrespective of any obstacle or limitation. The king's will is not overshadowed by anything. Not only does he get what he wants, he'll get it instantly. Now, this is not about haughtiness, right? Well, talk about the real idea of a king. I'm talking about corrupt kings. They're not truly acting like a king. So this is not about being haughty. This is about the quality of a king. That actually, according to Jewish law, a king has to be exceedingly humble. We all have to be humble. A king, even more so. Yet internally, even though there's a very deep sense of humility, still, as the role that he has as a king, what his needs are will be provided. What is necessary to be done will get done. So what does that mean on a personal level? But on a personal level, that means very simply, there's a job that needs to get done, a mitzvah that needs to be fulfilled, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what the concerns are of others or what might people think of it. You got to do it. You got to do it. So therefore, a mezuzah you put on the door, do you worry about anti-Semites, that they might target your home? Or you wear a kippah and tzitzis openly, maybe it might make some neighbors uncomfortable. Or if it comes to taking a trip and you need to daven, pray in the airport, are you worried about what other people think? Now, we're not talking about being haughty about it, meaning obnoxious, loud. No. You need to be humble. You need to be polite. At the same time, though, we disregard other people's feelings towards us when it impacts Jewish practice. When it comes to Judaism, there's only one thing: behave like a king. We might feel that, well, maybe this needs to be relegated to a more quiet, humble, discreet place. We have to ask ourselves the question, why am I thinking that to myself? Why would I want to do that? Is that a kingly thing to do or not? In this area of life, when God says that I made you into a nation of kings, it means in the fulfillment of your Jewish practice, behave like a king. Have the determination, the strength of spirit to do what you got to do. Okay, that sounds pretty lovely if you are very strong-minded and, really couldn't care what others think and how they perceive us. Some of us might think that, we're not so comfortable with this. We're concerned how people might think. They might see us as a little off, a little weird, maybe. How do you live up to this mandate of being a nation of kings? When the holiday of Sukkot comes and you're walking with your lulav and esrog, how do you feel about that? When you see someone taking out the lulav and esrog in the middle of a crowded area and benching with people, or having a menorah on your front lawn. So there's a challenge here. We live in the diaspora where we are a minority amongst a vast majority. How am I supposed to assume my role as a king in such an environment? So this is where we need to learn from the three kings, from Moshe, David, Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. Let us understand. Each one has something to share with us on how we can rise up and be kingly. So Moshe was in the desert, where life was quite supernatural. They had the clouds of glory that traveled with them by day to protect them from the heat of the sun. And they had at night the fiery flames that were protective of them. They had a rock that would gush out water throughout their travels. They had literally food falling from heaven, the manna provided for them. They had even great wealth that came to them. Physical wealth, spiritual wealth, they had it all. They had it all. They perceived God's presence. Life was a dream. a heavenly one, a beautiful experience, right? People perceived God's presence. It was so palpable. Get manna from heaven, of course. And the people responded for the most part, and we're connected. Now, for the Jews then, they didn't have to contend with other people. I mean, unless it came to battle. But on a daily, day in, day out, living in the desert, they had to contend with no one. So, you know, here it comes. Living 40 years in the desert. Moreover, they were completely independent. Everything came to them. And they led a spiritual exalted existence. So Moshe nurtured them. How did he nurture them? To give them what they needed. As again, the Raya Mehem, the faithful shepherd, he feeds the flock, he takes care of the people, right? So he took care of them in their material, physical needs, again, as we mentioned. But he took care of them that they could be real kings in their place of existence. So the Rebbe says in the Sikha, Moshe, whose primary element is Torah study, established and nurtured the kingship trait in every Jew. How? When we study Torah, we can be absolutely divorced from worldly considerations and concerns and completely focus on our Torah study. We're learning right now. I hope your phones are off. Mine's on airplane mode. I know when we study together, what happens? We feel transcendent of the human condition. You might be going through something, but when you really focus on your Torah learning, you're just brought up on a cloud and you're in a different form of existence. It's really being connected to God in the most deeply connecting way through the study of the Torah, that no one intrudes and nothing intrudes because we rise above everything. That's why when you have a difficulty in life, rather than saying, well, I can't really study Torah now, I'm just going through things. On the contrary, that's the time to study Torah. Because when you're going through something, Torah will lift you up and give you a different perspective on how to handle what you're going through. It gives you that momentary escape from the worldly stresses, because we attach ourselves to Hashem in such a deep way that we rise above it all. That the world can't touch us. Our problems are distant at that moment, which is beautiful. And that's what was granted to us by Moshe Rabbeinu. That's his element of kingship. And we call them the faithful shepherd. That's really what a king is. A king takes care of the needs of the people. So he took care of the physical needs with the manna from heaven, the water that came from the rock, wherever the well of Miriam, wherever they went. Excuse me. And then the clouds that protected them and took care of them and so on. And he took care of them spiritually. Gave them the Torah that allows them to rise above all circumstance. And that's what the desert is. You're a rise above all circumstance because there's nothing there. There's no one there that's going to hold you back from your connection to Hashem. Okay, that's the first level. Now we go to King David. his quality of kingship and what he gives us as a king, takes care of us, is a different quality. Whereas Moshe was in the desert, right? No interference from anything and anyone. King David was in our land, an established country, in a place now that you have to work hard to earn a living. Didn't come from heaven so direct. And King David had to settle the land and maintain the land, deal with the enemies in the land. Right? So that means you're dealing in the land with things of the land. Challenges of livelihood, challenges of people in the land that are try to wreak havoc within your land. And King David, what is he all about? Beseeching God that God will be there for him and the people in the land. So whereas in the desert, they didn't have to work in order to be provided for by the King Moses, here King David will provide, but the people have to work. They have to work. But at the same time, they need to work, but to recognize that what they're doing is fashioning a vessel, and God will fill it. Okay? Whereas when Moses fought the battles, he would raise his hands, his arms, and that would bring victory to the soldiers. It was something above and beyond. King David also fought, but he had to fight a military fight, and yet to be certain that security comes from on high, from God. Victory comes from God's blessings. So here you need to work, but yet know that the blessing comes from God. You need to fight the wars, and yet need to know the victory comes from God being on your side, right? Now, this is in the land of Israel, so it's a place of, it is the Holy Land, so there is miracles that do occur, but not like in the desert. Right? So Moses gave us the Torah that brings us into a different dimension. Study of Torah brings your mind, and if it brings your mind, then it'll bring your heart into a whole different plane of existence, like the desert, above and beyond. Everything is from above it in a miraculous way. King David, though, is in the land. You got to till the soil of the land. You got to fight the regular way of war. And yet, even though you till the soil and you fight the war, it's God's blessing that's going to make the success. So, what is King David? What is he most known for? What he gave us? Anybody? Moses gave us. Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah.
The Psalms.
Thank you. He gave us the Psalms. Tehillim. Exactly. So there's something very interesting about what King David and the way he writes the Psalms, for the most part at least, and what prayer is. Torah just brings you to, is top down, right? Prayer is bottom up because it's coming from the heart. So it's coming from a place of where there's something lacking. Just like in the land, you got to till the soil, you got to fight the battle. There's something lacking here. You got to put your effort in, right? You got to make your effort. So prayer is your effort because it's dealing with your heart. But there's something unique about King David and his prayers, is that he has utter confidence that God will provide. For the most part, right? And that's why his Tehillim is so much part of davening. Because davening is developing ourselves in our heart, working, but in our heart to make that a clear awareness and feeling that certainly God will provide. Certainly God will take care of us. Having that utter confidence in Hashem. Text on number 11 from the Rebbe Sicha, David's key element is prayer. He nurtured our majestic ability to pray like kings. Though we beseech God for our needs, right? So we're beseeching. Our requests are instantly granted without limitation or obstacle. They are granted the full requests made by a king, like the full request made by a king. Remember, we might mention that earlier. What is uniqueness about a king? What they want, they get. Right? What is prayer? Like a king. So prayer like a servant, that you're standing before God. You're standing like a servant before God. So you stand there in complete self-abnegation, complete given over. Prayer like a child is like you're requesting, Father, please help me. Prayer like a king is God. I know this is what's needed, and I know that you're going to come through. I have complete confidence. Because again, a king, whatever their request is, it's fulfilled. So if we daven like a king, means we have the absolute confidence God will fulfill our request. Sort of like, if you ever went out to a restaurant and you made an order, right, for something to eat, you're confident that the food's going to come and you're going to get it. So to pray like a king means you put in a request and you're confident God is going to provide. So now we can understand why Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, and King David are associated with Shavuos. The quality of kingship is a very essential and critical part of our relationship with our Judaism. We need to be able to be like a king, that there's no obstacles in our lives in getting whatever needs to be done in the service of God. And therefore, we learn that from Moshe Rabbeinu, who gave us the Torah, and the Torah has that quality that it just lifts us above the clouds, above the fray, and that we can get the job done, whatever God needs from us. And at the same time, we also are like King David. And the idea of prayer, that we pray like a king, meaning we're praying. We know that there's something greater than us that provides for us, and we have complete assurity, as a king has complete assurity that whatever his wishes, it's my command. Okay. That's great. Let's move on. So we're not living in the desert with Moses, and we're not living in the land of Israel in a time of King David. We're living in exile, in Gullus. How do you look at yourself as a king in exile? When you have your own land as King David, so okay, get the idea of each and every one of us as a king. When you're in the desert and there's no one there, on a daily basis to dictate, so we can live like a king. But how do you live like royalty when you're dependent on the nation state that you're living amongst? So through Torah, you can divorce yourself from the world and take refuge in Torah. And through prayer, we can also seek refuge and have our requests fulfilled when we pray like a king. But how do you feel like a king amongst, 100 times more people who aren't kings like you, who might demean that quality of kingship? So how do we act like a king in such a place as exile, as Gullus? We're not in our comfort zone. We're not in our own space. We don't control our destiny. We're subordinate to the law of the land. We may one day decide to bar public prayer, as they did during COVID, or ban circumcision and shechita, as actually in Sweden they do. We have a long history where these things have happened. How are you supposed to feel like a king under those circumstances? So for this we need the Baal Shem Tov. He lived in far worse circumstances than we live in today. Far worse. Let's look at the following text. I hope you can read it. During the late 17th century, European Jewry was still reeling from the devastation wrought by the Lenetsky pogroms in 1640-49. Massacres left tens of thousands of Jews dead, and the grief-stricken survivors struggled to rebuild their broken lives and communities. In the wake of the pogroms, the infamous Shabtai Tzvi led thousands of despairing Jews to believe that he was the long-awaited Messiah, destined to redeem them from exile. Many Jews were inspired with the hope that their suffering would soon end, but after Shabtai Tzvi turned out to be a fraud, he converted to Islam under the pressure of the Ottoman Turks. They were plunged back into the bitter reality of shtetl life. After the pogroms, many families were left without a livelihood, and a vast majority of children were forced to abandon their Torah study at a very young age, sometimes as young as 5 or 6 years old, to help to provide for their families. Only the wealthy, few and far between, could afford a proper Torah education for their children. This resulted in a generation of largely ignorant yet pious and devoted Jews who were, for the most part, neglected, scorned by the learned elite, the Talmudists. A rift developed between the learned and the unlearned, to the point that many towns, the two groups prayed in separate synagogues. Against the troubling background, small Polish town of Tlusk, in the 18th of Elul, 1698, Eliezer and his wife Sarah gave birth to their only child, Yisroel. Yisroel Baal Shem Tov, of course, as he became to be known. So it was in this difficult time, a very low point in Jewish history, that came in the Baal Shem Tov, who led a very supernatural life, and great commitment to the Jewish people. He inspired and energized the entire Jewish people, as the Rebbe says in this week's Sicha. Baal Shem Tov taught that Jews can transcend their diaspora environment, even the deepest, darkest days of exile. We can regard ourselves as a kingdom of priests who are directed by God Himself with divine providence. He guides each detail of our daily lives in a miraculous manner. When we behave this way in exile, we demonstrate that we can be transcendent. We can leap over all obstacles without granting them any credence. We don't climb over them step by step. We leap over them without measure or limitation. Thus, we transcend the depths and the darkness of exile to become a kingdom of priests. So as we said, the Baal Shem Tov and what he contributed is most relevant to us. It inspires us that no matter what the tension there is in life, whatever challenges and difficulties and limitations that there is in exile, that we are truly free to overcome them. Yes, the land isn't ours. We're subject to laws of others. But God proclaimed us to be a nation that is Mamlechas Kayanim. We're like kings. Kings in respect to our Jewish commitment. Meaning, when we are resolute in our commitment, we will move forward and we will succeed. So, the obvious question is, okay, that sounds great. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. But how? How are we going to succeed? I mean, after all, we've seen some very ugly times in our history. So, of course, we need to learn from the Baal Shem Tov. Nothing stopped him in fulfilling what he needed to fulfill and succeeding in what he needed to succeed in. The world didn't oppose him. In so many stories that we know of Baal Shem Tov, this is called the Baal Shemske Hanhaga. It's a behavior that Baal Shem Tov means like we're above, we're a step ahead, we're a skip above the world, where the world doesn't dictate. We rise above. That's the way he acted, and that's what he taught. So let's go into an idea that he taught that can help us, how we can rise above and not allow the human condition to dictate on how we are going to act and behave. So this idea of hashgacha pratis, divine providence, what does it mean? How do we understand that? So there's a lot of discussion and debate amongst the scholars about this. And the Baal Shem Tov emphasized an idea that was already in the teachings of, in the verses of the Torah and explained in the Zohar, and more recently, 500 years ago, in the Arizal's teachings. But the Baal Shem Tov truly developed it and made it something that was, with very capable of appreciating and understanding the concept of divine providence. As individual and direct attention is paid to us by God Almighty, to the entire human race. And he brought it to a new understanding and appreciation. Let's see the previous Rebbe. Okay, previous Rebbe writes, we are all familiar with the Baal Shem Tov's teachings on divine providence. God determines the precise wanderings of a little piece of hay or a leaf torn from its tree, and how many times they will twist in the wind. The Baal Shem Tov says that God sets many things in motion to guide the tiniest creation along its destined path. A leaf has been lying in some backyard for an entire year. A piece of hay has been serving as a part of a thatched roof for several years. When they are destined to relocate, God breaks up out a stormy wind, even in the middle of a hot summer day, overturning the heaven and earth. All this to guide a leaf fallen or a piece of hay to its providential destination. So this is all planned by God. It's the leaf that falls from the tree. It's not just a leaf falling from the tree, it's God's handiwork. And it's doing that for a purpose. That fell off the tree, it flowed like this, and then like that, and then it fell over here, not over there. All of that is predetermined. But it's even further than that. That God's handiwork, that he is engaged in that. Okay, that's one thing. But on a deeper level, it's actually been already ordained by the 6 days of creation and before. This is part of God's plan and therefore becomes vital to the overall scheme and purpose, as the previous Rebbe explains. Okay. Oh, there we go. Moreover, the movement of a particular blade of grass touches an overall purpose of creation. When you combine the particular movements and functions of the endless trillions of creations of all types, the divine purpose that undergirds all of the creation is fulfilled. If the movements and the direction of a single blade of grass is directed by divine providence and impacts the overall purpose of creation, humans, along with all their details and needs, are certainly guided by divine providence. So, before the world was even created, every single detail of creation is set in motion. It's placed. It's there. It's not that God is merely controlling it now. Of course, he's controlling it now, and he's giving reality to it through his word and bringing and animating it something from nothing every moment. But all of this was detailed and planned to the specifications perfectly before even creation. Wow. We don't perceive that. To us, it seems like a random thing. Oh, I forgot my keys. I run back to go get my keys, right? And because of that, what happened? Oh, I met a person. Happened to me today. I had to go to the bank. Actually, to 2 banks. And couldn't find parking, so I kind of parked in a place where I shouldn't park, but I was there for a couple of minutes. So I figured I couldn't find. Then I come out and I see there's parking. So, let me take my car around. Took the parking, came out, do whatever I have to do. Who do I see? Good old Jay that I haven't seen, hasn't come to shul for a long time. We embrace. I think to myself, wow, how divinely orchestrated it was that, I couldn't find parking. So I parked not in an appropriate place. So I was there just a couple of minutes. So I was, but then I didn't want to sit there. I had to go elsewhere. Moved around, all that. I could have missed Jay by 10 seconds this way, 10 seconds that way. But it was all divinely orchestrated. if a single blade of grass is guided by the divine and is there to fulfill an overall purpose of creation, then you and I, so much more so, we're divinely guided. Everything is divinely orchestrated. And it was all there already. Can you imagine my meeting today with Jay? And maybe he's going to hear the 10 Commandments because of that. And to come to shul. Could you imagine? Not only was God orchestrating at the moment, but it was already in God's plan more than 5,000 years ago before creation, that this should happen today. You think about that. Ooh, that's pretty awesome. So think about it. The question I asked earlier, you're in the airport. You see a bunch of Jews davening in a minyan, and they're doing it discreetly, but yet proudly, openly. How do you view that? How do you look at that? So we go to a place thinking that the purpose is, I'm traveling. I got to make $1. So I'm on a, business, traveling for business, or I'm traveling because I've got family I got to go see. And so we're going to do what we want to do. But God has everything intricately planned, not just today, but from before all of creation. No AI computer could do that now. Or what's the AGT or whatever it's called. Couldn't put all that together, that we should meet, or that I should encounter going to the airport and seeing these people. They're davening. So not only was that something that is all the things that had to happen for these people that are coming from random places and not even necessarily going to the same destination, if they are, they should come at the same time to come and daven. That was determined before all of creation that should happen. But it goes to the very purpose of creation, that God is in control and guiding things purposely, so that you're meant to meet these people, to encounter them. Why are you encountering these people? What is the purpose of all of this getting together? It seems random, but is orchestrated, as the Baal Shem Tov teaches us. Let's find out if I could get my... Oh. Rabbi tells us, as Jews, we must know that when we go from one place to another, we're not going on our own. We are being directed from above. The intention, the purpose is to cause his name to dwell there, to make God known in that locale. Wow. Pretty heavy duty. Why am I going to wherever I'm going? I think I'm going for my purposes. And God says, no. You're going there because I have already arranged this. Right? We don't have control. The only control we can have is, how am I dealing with this arrangement? I came to the airport. I see Jews davening. Do I join them with the Mincha Minyan? So I kind of walk away and like a little, put off by it. So know that it was all arranged and perfectly there from before creation. And the whole reason is simply, oops, by the way, I had the wrong, I read this and I showed you 15, the wrong one. The whole purpose, the whole intention is that wherever you go, God's presence should be revealed. God should dwell there. So if a minyan is right there in front of you, oh, the minyan is a way to have God dwell there. Beautiful. If there's God forbid, a profaning of God's name because people are acting inappropriately, so God's not dwelling there, don't be a part of it. And when we act that way, and as the Rebbe continues in this week's Sikha, a Jew might think that at a time when there are so many challenges against observing Torah mitzvahs, it is enough to practice in a normal way, which is hard enough and often entails extreme effort. How can we commit ourselves to practicing Torah mitzvahs like a kingdom of priests under such circumstances? How can we act as if the entire world, Din-Chabad, doesn't exist? So when you think about the divine providence, right, that the whole airport was created, the flight attendants, the pilots, everything that's going on there is all coordinated by the unseen hand of God. And it was there predetermined before creation. It's not just a happenstance now. And the reason why, because everything that happens is for a reason. And what is that reason? That I should be able to perceive the godliness, to reveal the godliness in that moment. And that's our God-given mandate, is to see whatever God has, the winds that are blowing, the circumstance at hand, it's nothing but God guiding in order that I can bring the presence of God in that moment. That's our purpose. Very powerful idea that if we bring into our lives this awareness of how everything's so orchestrated, as the Baal Shem Tov teaches us, then nothing gets in our way to fulfill what we need to fulfill, because we know what it was created for. Just for me to bring the dwelling of God, His presence, into the world at this moment. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? So to go proudly with your, I was at a wedding, a lot of Jews, bunch of Jews, Jewish wedding. Actually, I was the rabbi performing the ceremony. And there were Lubavitchers there, non-Lubavitchers, all different types of religious Jews, non-religious Jews. And I took out tefillin and started putting on tefillin with people. Why? Because God gives by divine providence that you're in a gathering of people, and not to bring the presence of God there. Well, you could say, but it's a wedding, celebrate the wedding. Of course, but if you could bring another mitzvah into the celebration. And the first guy asked was a 23-year-old young man. I said to him, Jordan, this is in the middle of the hall, right, sitting by the dinner. So we could put on tefillin here, and everybody else will see you do a mitzvah. Or if you're not comfortable with that, we could go into the side room over here, and you can put on tefillin there. And in the end, the most important thing is that he's doing the mitzvah, and I want him, to feel okay about it. She said, "Oh, let's do it here." So, wow, I was very proud of him. That's beautiful. Inherently, even though He puts on tefillin from time to time, but inherently he understood that a mitzvah is something to be proud of. Do it publicly. Let the world know. But I'm a Jew and I'm doing a mitzvah. Nothing's going to hold me back. I'm not going to be ashamed and embarrassed of it. I'm going to be happy and proud to do the mitzvah. So he put on, then his younger brother put on, and his uncle put on, and others put on because he set the way. Trailblazer. Shkoyach Jordan. Hi. All right, folks.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. So this is all in preparation for Shavuos. Mamlechas Kayanim, where the kings, the priests, that we don't allow anything hold us back. And when we show that nothing's going to hold us back, then God is going to bring us, renew the Torah covenant with us in a stronger, greater way and give us more capacity and greater strength to persevere and do what you got to do. Bring Mashiach now.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you, Rabbi.
Amen.
God bless.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Well, bye-bye.